Hello and welcome everyone to this week's workshop/webinar. I'm realizing that a lot of these sessions are me talking. There's been a few questions the last few times, so it's kind of a webinar. Hopefully this one's going to break that mold and get through a lot of questions from you. That'd be great. It's more fun that way for me. Give it another minute or so before we sort of start things off. Hopefully get a couple more people to turn up. In the meantime, please do drop into the chat to say hello to everyone, possibly where you're from. It's always nice to know. It's great to have George on board yet again. Always good to see you here, George. Let me share my screen to get things started. Move this one over here. Okay, so this talk here, resolving transaction discrepancies. As I'll go on to, it can be transactions, it could be leads, it could be job applications, it could be anything at all. I'm using Google Analytics as my example, but again, it could be any digital analytics tool. The quick introduction, as always, although I think everyone here knows who I am. My name is Peter. I am an Australian. I'm currently focusing quite hard right now on speaking slower and trying to enunciate. I hope that's working and you're appreciating it. I lived in London for 16 years. I'm now in the Netherlands, moving into my first home I've actually ever bought in a few weeks' time, which is very exciting. Working in digital analytics since 2006. Had my own agency, which is gone now. I exited that last year. I'm also the founder of MeasureCamp. If you didn't see, I'm wearing a MeasureCamp Prague t-shirt today. MeasureCamp Prague is back tomorrow. Very excited for them there. I'm there myself, but it's quite exciting to have it back in person and hopefully quite safe. And I'm back freelancing under ZHS Orchards. These workshops, webinars, it's sharing my ideas, non-read blog posts, a different way of learning here. There's no quite a structure to my ideas, so a formal course wouldn't work so well. We should be about 45 minutes, possibly up to an hour. Hopefully some of you got your lunch, eat your lunch in the background, that's fine. This is MeasureCamp style though, so please feel free to ask questions at any point. Best way of asking questions is in the Q&A feature on the right-hand side of your screen. Also, if you want to ask a question in person, that's always great, in which case please raise your hand. It should be an option in the icons at the bottom. You can also drop it in the general chat, although I may miss the question that way. A bit hard for me to pick up, hence the Q&A is better. And note as well, you've got some remojis for Remo in the bottom right-hand corner. If you like anything I'm saying, please give me a clap or a thumbs up or a quizzical look if you're very confused. And this is a chance to share my knowledge. I mean, with this is the process I follow and have followed again and again, as recently as 2 weeks ago, to identify issues with transactions. Let me know what you think works, what doesn't work, but hopefully it'll work for yourself. And of course, this is partially lead generation for me. So if anyone has this issue, wants some help with it, please get in touch. But the concept here, as a quick background, quick reminder, the whole point of digital analytics is to provide the intelligence, the insights, the information, not the data and the reports, but the intelligence from the data that informs the business actions. The whole point there, leading to an improvement in performance for online organizations. And the reason that matters, I mean, because digital analytics data itself is never accurate. So how are we going to be able to do this sort of purpose with inaccurate data? And there's reasons why the data is never accurate. Some examples are here. The analytics code itself is not fired. So you miss out on page views, events, possibly users, on transactions, obviously. That there's errors in the implementation. It doesn't record the right information. It's fired twice. Things just aren't right. I mean, the actual definitions used, what the concept of a session is, even a page view, they're they're self-defined within the tools. So there's it's hard to get a true answer. How many page views, how many users, how many sessions, let alone anything else. And of course, there's information which is not including digital analytics at all the actions that happen off the website. And so you're not getting accurate information, which means, well, how can you then take the smarter business actions to get the improvement in performance? Is the whole point here. And the key thing to remember when I talk about this is that the data itself isn't the focus point. The focus point is the intelligence. And to get intelligence, you don't need 100% accurate data. You need to indicate what's going on, for who, where, why, but you don't need to be 100% accurate. And at least the second point here, that useful data, that's usable, that used data that actually people use to inform their actions is much more important than accurate data. But having said all that, there are some metrics which are known quantities. Like I said before, I mean, a page view, it seems so simple. Of course, you know how many page views you've got, but should the code be fired at the top of the page or when the page is fully loaded at the bottom of the page? Because location of the page will change your count of page views by 2, 3, 4%, or what the actual percentage is. Should be fired when a pop-up appears, when you got an overlay, when you go through different stages of a checkout, one page checkout process, are these pages or not? And so pages themselves, it's a how you want to define it and how the technology is installed. So it's an unknown sort of number, what is correct and what's not correct. Other metrics though, they're more known. An example, transactions. You have a number here in Google Analytics or any tool, number of transactions, but you also got a number in your backend systems, the actual true number of transactions. So you can tell if this is a correct number or not. And then again, everything I'm talking about today can be used with any digital analytics tool. I'm using GA as my example. And again, transactions, but any number where you know the backend actual number, leads, job applications, this equally works. And the reason it's important is because stakeholders, your C-suite, your management team, they have to trust the data. And if they see, well, we've got 10,000 transactions, we're reporting only 3,500 of them, that's clearly wrong. Is everything wrong? I don't trust the data, I can't use it. So these key numbers, if we can get them accurate, not accurate, but close, ideally under 5% is my sort of traditional target. That may be a higher number these days as I go into the end of the talk. But if you can get the discrepancy under 5%, it's not accurate, but it's useful, it's close enough, people can trust the data and then start using it. So that's the background, that's the concept. And again, please raise your hand, put a question in the Q&A, even general chat, if this isn't making sense to you. If you want to clarify any points, please just let me know and I'll go through anything in more detail. But if not, here's the process I use, have used for years, and I'm still using now. Requirements first, to be able to do this. First, you actually have to be able to access the backend data, which sounds stupid until you do discover the odd retailer who actually can't access their transaction data for some weird reason. So you have to be able to access the backend data. Every instance, the metrics, so every transaction or lead or job application must have a unique ID associated with it. So you can look at the IDs from your analytics tool, and that ID must be captured in your analytics tool. So you need the transaction IDs captured in Google Analytics. And the same transaction IDs must be available from the backend system. You then need more details. So for transactions, you need to know things like the payment method being used, the country, the products being purchased, delivery times, anything else. The more details you have about transactions, the more you can look for patterns. So you must have some additional information. And the data itself must be of a certain size. I mean, my gut guess at this, probably at least 50 conversions per day. 50 transactions, 50 leads per day. The more the better. The bigger the number, the easier it is to spot the patterns, because that 50 transactions might be okay, but then you have to break that down by 4 or 5 different payment methods by different countries. And then even then you're getting, instead of hit ones and twos and threes, it's much harder to see patterns. If you're in the thousands, life becomes really easy, much easier. Yeah, and Mark has made a good point there. The unique ID, it has the same unique ID in your analytics tool as in your backend systems. I've also seen again and again instances where they're using different IDs for some reason. They've created a transaction ID just for the analytics tool, and there's no reference table between matching that and the backend systems. That's a requirement to have that, be able to match it up. If the IDs are different, there has to be some sort of cross-reference table to say the ID in the analytics tool, this ID in the analytics tool matches that ID in the backend systems. That's critical. So all 4 points have to be in place for this to be possible. And when you've got that, you're now trying to, first step, before you even investigate the data, you're trying to make sure you've got a like-for-like comparison. So you're not comparing apples with oranges. So let's say here, we've got two numbers. We've got back-end transactions, 7,215. That's how many actual transactions there were reported to you. In the GA data, we've got 6,468 transactions recorded, which means what discrepancy, 10.4%, more than the 5%. That doesn't sound great. Two numbers here, the right numbers to comparing. That's your first step. And some reasons they could be the wrong numbers. First of all, look, what date are the transactions being recorded on? Because in GA, they're recorded against the day the transaction actually occurred on the website or the app. In your backend systems, though, I've been given these numbers before, and they're actually matched the date on which the order was processed or sent out from the warehouse or the payment was received. That's not like for like. We have to get the transactions from the backend system on the day the order was actually placed, matching GA. Time zone is another issue there, and this was a recent example I saw where one system uses summertime, one system just uses the plain default time. They're off by an hour. Over the course of a month, doesn't make much of a difference. Seeing thousands per day, a small difference. But even that 1 hour, if you've got low numbers or certain things happen on certain days, could throw numbers off by quite a bit. So check that point as well. Make it alike so you can do a proper comparison. Then this number here could actually be inflated. It could include internal staff orders, call center orders, store orders, all things which are recorded in the backend data but won't appear in the GA data. So it's not a like-for-like comparison. Removing these might bring this number down here to about 6,520. Within 5%, tick that box. We can trust the data. We're doing a true like-for-like comparison. So that's a good thing to check for first. Does this number here include in these sort of details? I've also seen a couple of times duplicate transaction IDs in the backend data. They're recording the same transaction when it's been processed and when it's been, say, cancelled. It appears as two rows, and the person on the count in the backend is just counting the number of rows. That inflates this number, makes it incorrect. It could also be too low a number. Again, we see how many actual orders were there. Well, we had 9,000 orders, 1,785 were cancelled, leaving us with 7,215. The GA data will include both the active orders and the cancelled orders. So this actually needs to be included back in again, has to include cancelled orders. Anything that could appear in GA, anything which was placed on the website or the app, needs to be counted here as well to get a true like-for-like comparison to make sure this number here is correct. Then the GA data, that could also be wrong. We can see here in GA, duplicate transactions is a very common issue. To check for that, create a custom report where the dimension is transaction ID, the metric is transactions, sort it by number of transactions, and you should be seeing all ones, or maybe at the top, a couple of twos. If you're seeing a 20, 30, like a big percentage of twos, threes, 15 number of transactions per transaction ID, you've got a duplicate transaction issue. If that's the case, look up SIMO, duplicate transactions, and start following the instructions of how to try and fix this. The number may also include your internal orders or test orders, data which won't appear in this sort of cleaned up data set here, particularly test orders happening on dev systems, make sure the process is working correctly. They're not real orders, they'll appear somewhere here. They need to be removed from the system. But if you've done all of that, and that number is now correct, and that number is now correct, then we're looking at tracking issues. Bring this number down, discrepancy more than 5%, it needs further investigation. Had the question asked here by Eliza, significant discrepancies, cookie settings, basically cookie consent policies, we're not going to track visitors, and that means orders aren't being captured. Yeah, that's probably becoming a bigger and bigger issue. I'm going to mention at the very end a bit more about this. Right now, in the past, I use 5% as my test case. That 5% might be a lot higher now, potentially. I'm trying to investigate for myself if there's any workarounds with this within GDPR and e-privacy regulations. Can you actually track this information based on a contract agreement with the users who are logged in, typically, to make a transaction? That's a whole discussion properly, and I'll come to that later on. But for the moment, for the purpose of this, let's ignore that point to a degree, because it's just so overriding. Put it to one side for now. We'll come back at the end, how much cookie consent and not tracking people could affect this data. So the first step here, I want to look at data at a daily level, because things should be pretty consistent day in, day out. If the issues are the same, there basically just some bugs in the tracking or some other issues in place, the discrepancy shouldn't be that different every day. You'll see some noise up and down, of course, 11.5%, 12.5%, but it shouldn't be jumping from 2%, 12%, 3%, 14% day in, day out. That's just a whole different problem. And this is why having a big enough sample set is important. If you're only having 20, 30 transactions, you'll need to have 3, 4, 5 issues, just noise issues, to see the numbers sort of jump wildly up and down. The bigger the data set, the more this pattern should be consistent. That's good to know, because it means doing the sort of next step of investigation, you can pick any day or date range from this entire period and it'll represent the whole. You don't have to look at a very long date range to figure what patterns are. You can also look to see this sort of step change here, and it's great to see because something happened clearly on about the 10th of October. Talk to the tech team, what was implemented there, check GTM, release schedule, investigate as much as possible what happened on this date, because that could explain to you the reason that this changed from 7% to 12%, and once you know it, you can try and fix it. So that's the place to start. Then when you've got that, what I want to do is pull out a list of all the transaction IDs from your tool, your Google Analytics, and from your backend transaction IDs. And just do a simple VLOOKUP, something like this. Is each one of the backend data, is it captured in GA or not? And do the reverse as well. And here we're seeing 8.8% of transactions are missing. More than 5%, investigate further. There's also weirdly some transaction IDs not in the backend systems. Oh, the SH issue. Why aren't they appearing here? That might mean this number here, the GA total number, is incorrect as well. Going back to those reasons we saw back here, this test could help just expose things you hadn't picked up previously. So here's where I start the information off. and I'll come to that in a second. It's always worthwhile comparing transactions, number of page views of the confirmation page as well, because this again can expose potential issues. I mean, the numbers here, the number of transactions versus number of page views or unique page views, all three numbers should be pretty similar, as they are here. I mean, 11 entrances, that looks bad. That was a bit wrong there, but it's a very small percentage. I'm not too fussed about that. These three numbers match up. That looks okay. If you had seen a big number for these page views here, a much larger number than transactions, it means people seeing the confirmation page, transactions aren't being fired. What's happening here? It seems like it's saying the transaction code is at fault. Let's look further into that. Or if you saw a much lower number here, it might suggest that transactions actually happen on different pages of the website. There's different processes people go through to hit different confirmation pages. That's worth looking into to see, is the code working on some confirmation pages, but not all confirmation pages? If you could find there was 5 versions of the order confirmation page, and transactions were firing correctly on 4 of the 5 and not the 5th, easy fix, tick that box, and the discrepancy number will drop right down. So here's a nice sense check place. And then, I've had the order off wrong here. Use this previous sort of investigation, but now add in more columns for different other dimensions. Things like the payment method here. And then it's a simple pivot table to see, for each payment method, how many captured, how many missing, and what the discrepancy was. Payment method is one example, delivery country, order time of day, order day of week, potentially, different categories of products, different values of products, anything you can think of, look in here as different dimensions to see if you can find any patterns. Because all things holding equal, and especially when it's bigger numbers in the thousands here, this discrepancy, 5%, 5%, 4%, should be pretty consistent for all payment methods. When you hit lower numbers, it may start jumping up and down a little bit, but it's pretty big for the big numbers. And you're looking for things like payment methods or any dimension value where things just look totally different. I mean, this one here is brilliant. This one payment method, no transaction are captured, but it's under 5% for everything else. Find the issue here, capture that payment method as well in transactions. This will drop to around 4 or 5%, matching everything else. Discrepancy under 5%, tick the box, move on. That's the easy fix, much rarer to find. But you will see some patterns here generally, or quite commonly, where it is the 4 or 5%, and if you're at 10%, 15%, 20%, it gives you a starting point to investigate in the code what's happening. The date range, up to you. It could be as short as 1 day. It could be 4 weeks. The biggest thing is to find big patterns of numbers. If you get 100,000 transactions a day, 1 day is fine. If that takes 4 weeks, look at the longer date range rather than just 1 day. 1 day with 50 transactions is not enough. As Marcus says, 18 payment methods sounds a bit extreme, and just for number 6, whatever it is. Cash on delivery, it's a bad one. You never get the money that way. You can also check for patterns directly in Google Analytics or any other tool you're using. What I often do here is you want to look at the confirmation page or the confirmation transaction, the previous step. So the order summary page or the order review page or the payment details page, whatever it is. So the last one in the process and the confirmation page. Reduce your entire funnel down to 1 stage only. And here, it should be around 56%. Fine. But it's at 64% for these browsers, 54% for Safari. Why is Safari so much lower? I mean, and they're here, not a big a deal. But if you're seeing that it's at 75, 80% for some browsers and 0%, dream scenario, 10, 20% for other browsers, again, it triggers you where to investigate further. And again, this goes for device category, the mobile versus tablets versus Desktop, obvious. The browsers, the browser versions. One of my biggest wins ever was looking into this and seeing Internet Explorer 7 versus Internet Explorer 8. This was a long time ago, had big differences here. Internet Explorer 7 converted about 5 times the rate of Internet Explorer 8. That triggered us to look at Internet Explorer 8 to look for an issue there. We found it, and that fixed the problem. So look for the patterns directly in your analytics tool. And so just to summarize this, the common causes of discrepancies from my experience with it. Payment methods is the most common one I sort of find. Well, look for this first. Because what can happen is the visitor goes off the payment method and doesn't come back to the confirmation page. Or they go to a different confirmation page, not the main one. Or it's return the confirmation page without the information you need to populate the transaction details. Am I missing the transaction ID for some reason, or the product information? And that breaks it. So payment methods are a very common issue here. Look for that first of all. Once you know it, go through the process. See what's different this payment method compared to every other payment method. Duplicate transactions is a common reason why the GA data is actually inflated. There's various blog posts about this. Always have a look at this first if your numbers look wrong. So just laughing here in the background, just noticing general chat. Awanda's mentioned method 6 sounds like ideal, which is I now know about. I'm now in the Netherlands, Dutch market. And funny you say that because it is the exact method I've found an issue with a client right now that hopefully is being investigated to see what's causing the issue. So yeah, ideal can be a problem. The internal conversions, whether it's the call center data or test data, it's breaking the numbers. So your numbers look to be very different or possibly even too close. It's because you're doing a like-for-like comparison. Make sure this is corrected before we actually go any further. The conversion actions aren't being tracked. So think about leads here rather than transactions. You can submit a lead via these 5 different forms, but actually there's a 6th form or a 7th form, other parts of the website. You track it for 5 of the forms, not the other 2, and that's causing the issue. So you have to make sure you've gone through and actually map out the website, which I always recommend, of course, and identify every single possible method to get to the conversion, and make sure they're all being tracked in the same way. The cancelled orders, make sure you do include cancelled orders. I've seen again and again almost the analytics data going higher than the back-end data, or they're actually very, very similar. And it sounds, that's great, tick the box. Double check first. Even if it looks to be correct, under 5%, make sure you're actually comparing like for like first, so it actually truly is under 5%. And this is a hard one as well. The code's not being fired quickly enough because a confirmation page is an exit point. You've done your work, you've submitted the lead, you've submitted the form, submitted your job application, you've placed your order, got the confirmation page, I'm out of here. And that page, especially the code on that page, might be at the bottom of the page and contain a lot of information. It loads slowly. And so they leave the website before it's fired. That's a common cause, one to be investigated, and quite possibly a cause of my current issues with one client. So these are common causes. As I mentioned at the start, is this 5% target, is that still realistic or not? We've got ITP, we've got the new iOS 15 issues, even bigger, GDPR, e-privacy, cookie consent banners right now. If they're blocking 10, 20, 80% of your visitors, we're going to be missing out 10, 20, 80% of your traffic and of your transactions. I mean, at some point, when can you stop trusting the data or to say, here's what it is? At that point, if you've got a big discrepancy and you're as far as you can, you've looked at everything on, actually, all's been working fine, we're just missing data here. Investigate, because I mean, at the time, you're not going to get the data correct. It wouldn't be 100% correct when within 5%. It's not possible. But can you prove in some way the numbers are correct as much as they can be? that yes, we're missing 50% of our transactions, and in fact, 50% of our entire data is missing. That is what it is. If you can prove that, can you restore that confidence? That's the big thing here we're trying to do, is restore the confidence of the C-suite management team, your stakeholders in the data. 50% is not great, but they're still becoming useful information and it's being used. That's still a win. Moving on from there. What that number is, I can't say. I think it varies a lot from website to website, company to company. I don't have an answer right now. I've got a call this afternoon to investigate, are there any other options? Under GDPR, there's 6 different ways in which you can capture information, 6 different reasons for it, of which one is consent, possibly, and I'm not a lawyer here. One of the others is contract, and I'm sort of hoping that once someone logs in, and your terms and conditions then say, we can capture this information about you if you're logged in, please only log in if you're comfortable with this, you can then restore the tracking, even without consent, because they've given their consent by logging in. They've identified themselves. They're not anonymous anymore. You know who they are. I'm investigating. I'm hoping right now for this whole problem, there's a solution somewhere around that to capture this information. And that's me. That's definitely more of a webinar rather than a workshop, but hopefully it's very practical. Please, who's got any questions here? Anyone at all, please raise your hand. Any feedback, any experiences yourself with this? Anything you've found useful, which I've missed out on, or any questions at any point in the process, I can go back to and explain in more detail. Please raise your hand or comment in general chat now. Nope. Third in a row. I've destroyed all the questions being asked. Maybe a short session today, which is okay. So wait, no, someone's raising their hand. This is exciting. Ibrahim, please come and join me on stage. While it's happening, some ideas for next time, in 2 weeks, potentially a month. Some talks here, page dynamic conventions, and also I did doing digital analytics my way, or talk about digital analytics maturity. Abraham, you something to share here?
Yeah, happy to.
Yes.
Awesome. So yeah, thanks a lot. That was super helpful. So I was wondering about the, I mean, like the business side of it. So in a lot of cases, even if you reach 5%, even if it's like in a lot of cases, I see even like 1%, people would still complain. And even if they see, I mean, like in one case, I had a situation where the numbers, like I think one was like 99,000 something, and the real number in the back end was 99,700,000 instead of 600. That this means inaccuracy in the data. So if they see any changes for a lot of stakeholders, like especially with a non-technical background, that might cause a lot of the. And
yeah,
I was wondering if you have such situations and if you have like any advice how to deal with it.
that's a really tricky one, because I mean, we know that's amazing that sort of how close those numbers are. It's within 1%. That's a dream scenario. I mean, there is one possible solution is to go for server-side tracking, at least the transactions, and you might be able to capture all transactions that way to some degree, but it's kind of almost pointless. You're still missing out on the other information. The cop-out answer in a way is an education piece, and it's linked to my number 3 option for next time as well, maturity. You sort of need to explain how the data works and why that discrepancy will always exist, and somehow they have to become comfortable with it, because you can't get that data any more accurate. That's just not possible. So it's changing the way they think about it. I mean, you may hit some people who are going to use this as an excuse to not trust the data, going, oh, it's off by 5. I can't trust anything at all. I'm just going to use my knowledge, my experience, nor data. You can't change those people. This is an excuse, not a reason why they don't want to use data. For other people, it is education piece. I'm almost just thinking here, what it's reminded me of is that one of my learnings, in a weird way, surprised me, is that accountants don't provide 100% accurate information. And I thought accountants are your any of your accounts. Well, it's one way, it's black or white, true or false. But it comes with them as well, down to interpretation and where numbers are being moved around, different sort of categories, different years, what rulings are applied into it. There is, again, no one right answer with accountancy either. So I'm sort of thinking and hoping, can you bring in that sort of analogy to make with this? Like, explain why numbers are never black or white and never 100% accurate. That's about the best sort of different approach I can recommend. I mean, a similar thing like trying to get the numbers right is that asking, how do you define revenue? I mean, revenue is revenue, right? But does revenue include tax or not? Do you include the discount applied to it? What about product revenue? Do you include a product discount, like 25% off to each product in the product revenue or not? What if you store credit? Is that applied to the products? And so if it's really hard to define revenue, no number is black or white. So I think it's trying to find ways to explain why numbers aren't black and white, why accepting a bit of a discrepancy is fine, as long as consistent, showing how you can, the important thing is using the information and how it's useful as opposed to 100% accurate, and acknowledging the fact that if you hit someone who's still just using any error as an excuse to discard all the numbers, you can't change their mind, change jobs, wait it out, work around them, is what it is.
Well, thanks.
Welcome. Thanks for joining. Thanks for asking a question. Keeping me company up here. Move you on the stage. Anyone else have any questions? Marcus has said the most common reason, multiple transactions. I agree with that. It's like finding PII in your analytics tool. It happens, I don't know, 20% of the time, possibly more. It's a very common thing. So I think it's something which you always, for anyone with e-commerce website, always track your transactions and see if duplicate transactions is an issue. And if so, investigate that. Marcus?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me? Because I'm not using a microphone.
Coming through fine.
Yeah, okay.
It looks to be nicely outside in some sunshine.
Yeah, that's right. Why not enjoy on all channels, not only audio? So I just joined in to confirm what you just said, things about multiple transactions, because well, I don't think from my own experience when I look into data, it's likely more than 20% that I see transactions with multiple hits and double counted, even though Google does a heck of a job if those multiple transactions occur in the same session. But yeah, so they are usually deduplicated before reaching your data view. But I'm running a toolbox for auditing Google Analytics accounts, and there I have some insights about which errors occur in the most e-commerce installations that are audited with my tool. And I don't have an exact number, but I think it's about 30 or 40%, where when someone audits his Google Analytics with my tool, and he has e-commerce tracking, then I usually see 30 or 40% of this error. So they have duplicate transactions. that might be the case because they have a reason to audit. So there may be some bias in the data, but I really that's in my opinion, it's really the most common case.
No, I agree totally. That's a very common thing. And that number, 30-40%, with a bit of skew towards those people, doesn't surprise me. Have you looked, is it more common in smaller websites or smaller businesses rather than bigger businesses, or no difference?
Well, I guess most users of my tool are smaller businesses, because there are some hurdles that you have to take, like authorizing access to Google Analytics, and the bigger the company, the more likely it is that somebody says, no, don't do that. I don't know this tool. I don't know this guy.
Or they know for themselves how to check. They've got an analyst there who can check the data themselves.
Yeah.
But no, interesting. No surprise at all. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Well, bye then.
Cool. Thank you. So I'm assuming at this stage here, there are no further questions. Please, you got a couple more, a minute just to ask any more questions, raise your hand. Otherwise, I've had one request for digital analytics maturity, one request for page naming conventions. Anyone else want to drop a 1, 2, or a 3 in the general chat? I'd appreciate that. Otherwise, I'm going to look for myself and think through what I'm happiest doing. Couple more 3s. Apart from that, I hope you all have a great rest of the day, a great weekend. And I'm back. I was looking at whether it's 2 weeks or a month's time. I may make this more of a monthly session rather than every couple of weeks. Looking at 3s. I've looked at this. Thank you very much for your time. Talk to you next time. Cheers. Bye.